Hello, everyone. So today I'm here with our Prose Chapbook 2021 contest winner, Mell, and our finalist, Sara Siddiqui Chansarkar. And it's really, really a pleasure to be here with both of you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet. And I'm so thrilled that the two of you get to engage with each other as well. When I read both of your chapbooks for the first time in the queue, I was just blown away. I knew that I had something really special on my hands, and it's really been wonderful to work with both of you through the editing process, seeing what's happening with beautiful cover art that we've come up with, and just everything about it. So I'm so happy that these works are in the world now and that people can actually engage with them besides just me and certain staff members who are so excited about meeting in the first place. So yeah, you guys should pat yourselves on the back. Seriously. So first, I would like to pose a getting to know you question, which is 3 tropes, themes, or obsessions that keep coming up in your writing. So Sue, why don't you start us off?
Well, the 3 things that tend to drive my work, I have to say, are loss, grief, and mortality. But on kind of a lighter note, I would say also that music and art are definitely themes that run through, and also the idea of kind of the life of inanimate objects, personal objects that we have an emotional attachment to.
Absolutely. And I think all of those things are found to some extent in Skin Over Mouth, in Giving Care. I did not sleep enough last night. Sara, what about you? What would you say are 3 things that keep coming up in your work?
I think mine would be, gender parity, feminism, and relationships in general, familial or otherwise. And being an immigrant and a writer of color, so I try to, the feminism that I bring forward is not, the loud shouting out, off from rooftops or in the streets, not that kind of a feminism, but a very silent and resilient kind of a simmering down effect of that, is within women, and somehow they try to improve lives around them while they're still doing their course of duty. And that's what is also reflected in my chapbook.
Wow. Absolutely. As soon as you said those 3 things, it was like, that's it, man. And I think it's so interesting that that theme is also transparent in Giving Care, right? The idea of familial relationships, of feminism as a quiet duty, kind of pushing against expected roles or relationships or the patterns of expected things in society, right? That was one of the things that it was really just a coincidence, but I love the way that the works kind of resonate on these meditations of what family relationships should be like versus maybe what they are. And that was something that really attracted me to your chap, because I think that feminism sometimes is done so quietly and progress is made so slowly and invisibly, but it's really important for us to name it as such and to keep fighting for it, because there's other ways to fight. And I think quietly being there for what needs to be done, but also at the same time recognizing that the world needs to change is something that happens and needs to be esteemed for what it is. Especially the mother figure in your chap. I think she embodies that sort of duty where she's not actually the one that escapes. She's trying to hold that space open for her daughters. And that was one thing that I thought was very compelling about the chap in general, because she has such a tough situation. And unfortunately, that's just her situation. And she's kind of in it. So that's some really intense stuff coming up today. So my second question is that, for sure, right, all those things kind of have points of contact, despite the fact that the subject matter, the setting, the characters are so different. But both of them seem to revolve tightly around this world with well-established characters that are shown and developed through these flash moments of story. And as you said, Sue, sometimes it's focused on objects or focused on certain small things in the lens. And I think that's true of your chapbook, Sarah, as well. There are some amazing moments like with the rotten mango, with the grandfather stories, with these ideas of like simple household things that kind of take over the current flash and sort of expect the theme. So were these chapbooks accidents that just occurred as you kept writing and building on them? Or was it something that you very intentionally set out to build and then realized, okay, this is my chapbook? Like, did the overall conception for the chap come before the actual flash, or did the flash lead you to the idea that this could be a chapbook? And I think we'll start with you, Sarah, first, if you don't mind.
Okay. So yeah, I did not plan on this being a chapbook. So I just wrote the story. The first one in my book, that was the skin over milk, that story. And that was just because I, was wanting to write something about rain, because monsoon is such a phenomenon in India. And when I hear the rain, I just go back to my childhood. And when monsoon is sometimes so severe that it does flood your house. It goes into our courtyard. That used to happen in our house. So then I just started with that, and I just don't know where that milk and tea came from. I was just writing about life, in a house like that where water is flooding in. And that story was just 300 words, and I sent it to Bath Flash Awards, and it was a short list, and it shortlisted there. And I thought, okay, maybe there's something more to it. Maybe I should explore more. And then I thought about two of the stories that I had written about that, the ripe mango, and another one about ear piercing. Those were there, but not for the collection, but they were out there. They were published before. So I thought, yeah, I mean, this could be a story of these sisters who are in the house and trying to push out water from their house. And then, just the ears getting pierced, and the grandfather passing away, and the mango being kind of a supernatural or fantastical element there. So it just went on like that, and I just kept adding stories to it. So, and then I also wanted to preserve the collective voice of we, because the sisters are all, just one monolith kind of, so they're not very distinctive from each other. But so I just kept on with that. And once I realized I had 10 chapters, I said, okay, I'll submit it somewhere. And then I submitted to Chestnut Review. And then, of course, after editing it, it became 12 chapters. But yes, that's how it started and ended.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
What about for you, Sue? Yeah.
Well, it started with that first piece, the interval piece. And I submitted that to Cleaver magazine. And basically I had been, prior to starting those short pieces, I'd been working on the revision of a novel for a year. And so I needed something small and manageable. And on all that time taking care of my mom, I was always thinking of things and, kind of scrawling a little note here and there. But then I had the idea, my idea was originally to do a chapbook, a collection of little pieces about my mom, and then hopefully publish that and try to leverage it into a bigger book. But once I started seriously looking at the pieces, even before I had sent to Chestnut, I sent it to a friend of a friend who's an editor, just to sort of like for a conversation about developing a longer work. And in that conversation, I realized I didn't want to spend like 2 to 3 years working on a memoir about my mom. Like I just couldn't, I was already living in that and I couldn't double up on it. So then I ended up totally reorganizing the work and making it sequential time-wise, roughly. And then that's what I submitted as the chapbook.
Yeah. I think that for you, having come from a novel and knowing, how long that is, like, I really
Yeah.
respect the fact that, like, you were able to say, okay, for me, this is a chap. And I think that for that, right, even though it's not novel length, it has a searing intensity to it that really conveys the kind of emotions around the situation, the varying moods, the shifting, so well. And I think that, yeah, I mean, maybe someday you can revisit it, but for sure, like, I think if this is the only work that stands in the world, I'm so honored that we get to publish it and that this is the product. Like, I think anybody could be proud of that.
Oh, and I'm so happy. I mean, the changes that we made working together really elevated the work. I really feel strongly. I could not be happier.
Thank you.
And I totally agree, Maria. All your edits and, the loose ends that I had flying around, that we finally tied them up. I'm just so thankful for that.
But thank you.
And also, I just realized at some point, I guess when I was reading Sarah's chap, that you must have been editing these both at the same time. Like, I don't know how you were keeping your head on straight because so many little details. Amazing.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the more challenging things because we had just planned to publish one chap, and we had 5 finalists on our list that both our EIC and my prose co-editor at the time, DE Harvey, read. And the 3 of us had a meeting, and I said, look, I love all of these. I especially love these 2, which were your chaps. And I don't want to publish just one chap. Can we publish a second chap? But yeah, I think that maybe it was a little ambitious because James was like, are you sure? Because that might be a lot of work, like putting them both together and everything. It's like, I'm sure I want to do this editing work. But yeah, it was really because I wanted to work with these projects that this happened the way that it did. And I'm so grateful for to James, to Chestnut, right? I'm so glad that we have the time and space to kind of carve this out, because I really love the way that the chapbooks turned out. The editing process was amazing. I've worked with a lot of writers at Chestnut as the prose co-editor, and sometimes things happen, right? So it was really an amazing process, especially given that this wasn't just a one-off story or even a one-off flash where, at Chestnut that might go through several rounds of revision anyway, but something where it was so much longer and it needed to be cohesive. So it was definitely a learning experience for me. So I appreciate both of you. So that brings me to my next question, which can address both the wider world of writers who want to write prose chaps, or how the chapbook stands for you in your personal kind of work. So if we think of your work to date as kind of your whole collection of works, right? What is the role of a prose chapbook? If one of you feels strongly, you can just jump in with that. Yeah.
I would say, I mean, it's always wonderful to publish an individual piece in a literary magazine, especially a place that you're a fan of or that carries prestige. But there's just really something about holding a book in your hand. And there's something about small books. They're I don't know, I think there's a kind of perfection that you can get in a small book that is hard. I mean, I just reread my novel because I have to be talking about it over the next month. And I was like, it's like 2 years ago now that I wrote it. But there's all kinds of things in there that I'm like, if I had a chance now. And I didn't really get to work with an editor on that book. So completely different experience. So the chapbook, I think it's an opportunity to really hone a specific either aspect of your work in terms of experimentation. It makes room for all kinds of things that don't fit in elsewhere, but fit just perfectly in that space. And really because it takes a shorter amount of time to complete it, gives you a greater chance to sort of be out in the world, to have that work live in a significant way. I don't know if that really answers the question.
No, I think that's
Yeah.
an amazing answer to the question. And as you spoke, I thought about the kind of object focused or observation focused vignettes about nature, about the asshole squirrel, right? Those types of, right? Those types of things might not be able to stand on their own as just a flash out in the world. And I love writing stuff like that too. And I see that sometimes when I submit for publication, I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is actually like a story, or is this kind of like a leaning support to something else, right? So I think that what you said is really inspiring, because for sure I saw that in your chat. There was like a lot of work that was so beautiful and so liminal, but it depended on the narrative flash of the chapbook as a whole.
And I think also because it's something that you can read in a single sitting. So that's a very different experience than a novel, or even a short story you might not necessarily finish in one reading. But even then, that has just this, it's like a single arc, whereas a chapbook, there's so many, especially like in Sarah's, there are so many threads within each of those stories, and then how they're woven again in the larger picture. It has an immediacy that I don't think you really get in other works that are not single flash, for example.
Yeah, and just knowing how busy everyone is these days. So I mean, much has been said, of course, about attention spans and the reluctance to pick up a big fat novel, because people don't have that kind of time commitment towards a novel. So it's just, as Sue said, single sitting. So it's more palatable, and I guess also more affordable, because you don't have to shell out that amount of money to buy a big fat novel. So I think it works at both levels, for writers as well as for readers. For writers, where you just don't know, where you like, I could not expand this right now, and like Sue said, that she just didn't want to expand it into a full-blown novel, but just something more meaningful than a flash or just a small piece in a literary magazine. So I think it works both ways for writers as well as readers. Like, they get a full story or a full set of experience from a very thin book that they could just pick up anytime and read it right away.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I think there's some kind of heft to that. And I think it does have the compactness of the flash form, like the intensity. And you can do a lot more than you can in just one flash, because you can have several kind of instances of that intensity. And Sarah, I think that's really what your chap is like to me. I think maybe almost all of the stories could stand on their own, maybe with a couple talks, just to like put in expository line in there once in a while, if it's not read as a collection. But for sure, as a collection, it's like this hard drilling down into these essences of things, but that allows you to explore more than one essence of one thing, let's say. So that's something I really admire about the chap as a whole. Everything is so intense. Everything is just distilled down into these small moments of, okay, this moment can stand in for almost an entire lifetime.
And this is an aside, but I just wanted to say that, especially in Sarah, the way that you handled language, the use of, sometimes it feels so heavy-handed when people put in words in a different language, but I just, like, every time I was like, oh, this is so good, this is so perfectly handled, and it's so immersed. I felt so immersed in that world, and it's such a hard world. I mean, it's such a harsh reality, and yet you are invited in and kind of cushioned by these delicate details of clothing and sandals and the food and the actual words for those and the sounds. I just, it was you really created the world so vividly.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that Sarah excels at in all of her flash writing, not just in the chat pieces, but whenever I read a new Sarah piece, I'm like immediately grounded in time, place, setting, character, just like that's it. You're just there.
So kind of you to say that, Maria.
No, absolutely. That's how I feel. I'm immediately teleported to another place. It's not like some other writers or writing where I'm struggling a little bit. I kind of see a sketch, but it's not fully in, right? I feel like I'm just in that world immediately in a very, I don't want to say cinematic, but it's just like,
it is cinematic though.
yeah, it's like
It is.
you're in a video game and you've just created this digital environment of words. So yeah. Okay. So do you have any advice for people who want to write prose chapbooks? Our contest is open now until September 1st. And I know that prose chapbooks they're getting more popular, which is great. I'm working on one. God knows when it will be finished, but I think that it really is a great opportunity for writers to, as you said, commit to something that's not a novel, maybe finish something when finishing a novel isn't feasible, explore something that's maybe not novel length or wants to be presented differently. So what advice do you have when going through and like making this collection or like making a chapbook?
I guess first would be identifying the theme that you want to write about. And if writers who have been writing stories for a while, if you really narrow down on a theme, you will find glimpses of that in your work already that you already have. And I think that it's just putting them together and weaving them through that theme and writing a few more pieces. And as I did, I just had about 3 of them, and I expanded to 10. And, I think it's very intuitive if you are honed down on the theme and like Sue's example, for example, about taking care of her aging mother. So, I mean, there can be several small glimpses that you can just expand into one chapter at a time. And before you know, you could have 10 to 12 chapters. So, yeah, I think I would say leverage on what you have first and then expand on that.
That's great advice. And I would say, well, the first thing I would say is like submit. Submit everywhere and just don't fret. I originally started sending that chapbook out a much shorter version, like half as long. And it did place somewhere, placed at Digging Through the Fact at the very shortest version. But that encouraged me to continue and expand. And I would also say to remain open about the order of the pieces, because you'd be surprised at what you find if you really let the pieces talk to each other, or if you have the luck to work with someone like Maria, who has such a keen vision to see there's a sort of like what Sarah was saying, there's unconscious threads that you won't realize until you juxtapose things together. And, maybe you put together the things, chronologically, or maybe you don't. Maybe you do something that's jarring. I mean, because it is a small container, you can, I think you can have sort of more freedom to fool around and to sort of take risks that you might not be able to do, because the reader is already prepared for something different. I definitely think that a chapbook is a great venue for experimentation, in structure and form. And again, because it's small, it's sort of manageable. You can try something and then be like, okay, that doesn't work. And then you just put everything back, but it's not like 200 pages that you're like, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah, absolutely.
I may never write another novel. I don't know.
Well, I think you're allowed to bask in the novel that you have coming out in the
For a
world,
little
right?
while, for a little while.
You can let the nostalgia take over before it's like, wow, I really wish that I could write another novel. And then right, I think there's a cool off period that you have to go through. So, yeah, so we are seeing Sue at the end of her novel writing journey, which is culminating in her actually being published. So that kind of brings me to this, right? It's coming out now, Provenance.
Yeah, July 19th.
Yeah, so congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Congratulations, Sue.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to I have these questions that are kind of specific, but yeah, so how did writing Provenance differ from Giving Care? I think you've addressed a lot of that already, but if there's something specific you want to say about that, right? And the other thing is that you're producing these successful longer projects that win prizes. And I think a lot of writers would give one of their arms to be in that situation, right? So how do you keep showing up for your writing and pushing through, especially those tough stages, like the middle of the novel, just trying to find a publishing home, right? A lot of writers give up, right? They don't finish a project, or they're just like, oh, this is too hard. Or, personally speaking, they have life obligations and they just turn away from writing. But you, like our Chestnut stubborn writers motto, have the tenacity to keep coming back and finishing these things and then actually having success. So what's your secret?
Well, I would say a couple of things. One is I have always been a creative person. I've worked in a lot of different mediums, art and writing, all different kinds of stuff. So for me, making things has always been kind of a survival tactic. That's kind of how I worked through whatever is happening in my life, any kind of difficulty. And, certainly in the instance of my life now where I'm caring for my mom, if I'm not writing, if I'm not making something, then all I'm doing is caring for her. And then my life is totally subsumed in hers, so that this is a way for me to, hang on to myself and my own life, and put myself out in the world, which is something I've always been after, for whatever reason that is. I mean, some people are content to make things and enjoy them, but I always sought the recognition of publication, I did illustration and then I do writing. So publication is really the thing, or performance, if that's what you're doing. And I think for a longer work, like a novel, like I could not have done the novel without support. I started it in graduate school where I was working with a wonderful mentor. And then when I only had like 100 pages when I graduated, but then I continued, I worked with a coach who was more of a coach, more about what gets in the way of your writing and your work. I mean, she was also a writer, but it wasn't really like criticism I got feedback from her, but it wasn't critique. It was more about how to keep going. And then I completely rewrote the novel within a fellowship where I had the support of 2 other writers for half the year in a little pod. And then I worked also one-on-one with Amy Hempel. So I don't know. I mean, people do it by themselves, but I could not. That's those would be my 2 tips. Really is find support and find structure. And then also structure within your day if you can, whatever that means. What I know lots of people that have kids and write in 15-minute increments, but if you can just formulate some kind of habit that serves the work.
So if you could kind of tell us what Provenance I'm so sorry.
Okay, I can't say it either. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you could tell us what Provenance is about in a nutshell, I think that would be wonderful for readers who want to go out and find more of your work, and also who's publishing it so that they can
Oh,
find
it's
it.
Madville Publishing.
Okay.
And it's available through them directly or through bookshop.org or on Amazon. Oh, I'm so bad at this. This is my like, I'm like, can I read that cover copy?
That's fine.
Oh,
Hold
really?
it up and read it.
Yeah, yes, why not?
Okay. All right. Still grieving his wife's early death, DJ takes refuge in his sister's half-finished basement, imagining a comfortable and solitary retreat in the Hudson Valley town where they grew up. Instead, he finds himself caught up in her troubling divorce, drafted as caregiver for his 11-year-old niece, and unable to afford the storage unit crammed with hundreds of vinyl records and every other scrap of his former life. DJ gifts his niece a marbled glass egg, a pork pie hat, and one of his prized guitars. But what's asked of him is not to give the perfect object, it's to give of himself. Provenance is a story of hope in ruin. With subtle poignancy and humor, it offers a fresh take on contemporary conflicts, exploring pivotal moments of sorrow, longing, and renewal in the lives of three deeply textured and indelible characters. You can massage that any way you want.
No, I'm very excited.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it
Very
sounds
excited.
so amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Sarah, specifically for you, right, you have a collection, Morsels of Purple, which I see hanging out there in your wonderful Zoom background, which is a collection of 54 flash stories. So I know that you are incredibly prolific. You get published so much, you have these editing positions, and I know that you have a full-time job and also family commitments too. So right, there's a lot there. And I think that, right, what we want to do with our stubborn writers like workshops, with Chestnut in general, is just to encourage people to kind of have that grit of keeping to it, of getting published, getting out there. And I think that in some ways I would describe your writing career as fearless. So I'm wondering how you get your ideas, what the life cycle of a flash is like for you from conception to publication. How often do you submit? Is it something that you're just always doing, or it's like, okay, every 3 months I just send a wave out there in the world? You know, what's that whole process like for you?
Yeah, so for me, Flash, of course, I write Flash because I don't have that much of time commitment for a bigger work. So that works for my schedule, that, okay, because I have a full-time job in the technology area. So, and I have not been trained in creative writing or English literature or anything like that.
Oh, wow.
So all my, whatever little I know about writing is through reading, because I have always been a reader. So that's my habit from, when I was a little child, that from that time on, I was just reading everything that I could get my hands on. So Flash, I think Sue's book, in Sue's chapbook, the microwaving the applesauce for 9 seconds, that stood out to me so much, because most of my writing is like that. Like when I have 9 seconds, or, when I'm in the shower, some quiet time just to myself, that's when things that I catch during, my interactions with people, or things that I read, those come back to my mind. And that time that a kernel of a story is born, just that quiet 9 seconds or whatever time it takes to shower, and that's what Sue's story stood out that much, like, oh my God, yes, before everything else starts, before the workday starts and family, if I have that little time to think about what's in my mind, and for me, most of my stories are do not come from external stimuli as much as from within myself, like things that we observe and store within ourselves. They just pop up at some time and I just write about it. So and then submission, of course, is a conundrum to me. And what will be accepted, we don't know. I have not been able to figure that out. So, and I am still excited. I'm surprised that, oh my gosh, they want to submit my work. They want to publish my work. Really? Someone wants to read it. So, and that, it's kind of an instant gratification. And once I don't have a lot of pieces in the submission queue all the time. Like, okay, 1, 2, 3 got picked up. Okay, maybe then I'll work on some that are in the draft stage, not ready yet to be published. But then I like, okay, these are all gone. Now I need to have something else in the submissions queue. So I just put something else in there. So yeah, but it's not, I mean, you might seem that I'm prolific. I'm not, because those are things that have been sitting out there. I just hadn't worked on them for a long time. So it looks, and sometimes they just get published in the month. In just 1 month, we have 2, 3 pieces out, but they have been maybe waiting for a year in the submission queue. I just hadn't submitted them. So, and there are days when I just want to pull my hair, like, what am I doing? What is this that I've written? Like, I think that's with, I don't know about Sue and you, Maria, both of you are writers, but that self-doubt is always there, that is it good enough? And you just keep on editing and then changing the ending. Some are quick, some flashes will be quick, like I write in one sitting and one editing, and then it's picked up. But some just keep on simmering, like, okay, they should start not from here, but from here. The rearranging thing is that's endless for me.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, I think that a lot of people see the success on the outside, and that's something that I felt in your answer to Sue, right? They see, wow, you went to contests, wow, you're getting published. And they don't realize the hard work that's underneath, right? Like that little photograph of the iceberg, and it's like, okay, this is what you see, and then this is all the other stuff that goes into it. And Sarah, I love that you reminded us about that 9-minute or sorry, that 9-second thing, because that was something that really stood out to me the first time I read the chap, and every subsequent time of, wow, you take these micro spaces to kind of just be yourself. And I think that for writing, that's a great, maybe the analogy for the process, right? You fit the writing into the time you have. You don't make the time necessarily, because some people can't, right? They don't have the time to make. So.
And sometimes like having more time is your enemy,
Yes.
True.
I knew a stand-up who used to do this joke about, was it that if he, I can't remember what it was, but the essence was that, like, if he had like a day off, like he couldn't so much as get to the post office, but in a normal day where he had to work and do a set at night or 2 sets, he did a million things in the day, but if he didn't have to do anything, he couldn't get out of bed. Yeah.
I feel that. Yeah. All right. So our last question, which is about the future, right? So I invite you to tell us a bit about what's next. And that could be as simple as getting rest. Right? Not speaking specifically to anyone. But it could be as simple as taking a creative break, recharging. It could be a new project or something that's coming out that you're excited about. So what's next for both of you?
Well, when I forgot about this for a minute, but one of the other things that I did when I finished my fellowship is that I had a bunch of stories that I had published early on in my writing career, or whatever you want to call it, in my writing life. And I had always, initially I never thought of writing a novel. I always was thinking of a story collection. And I had sort of, it's like 6 stories, which was way too short for collection. But what I did is I wrote into the secondary characters. So then I flushed out the second half of the book that way. And I've been sending that around to wherever I could. There's not very many agents that will even look at a collection, but whenever one comes on my radar, I query them, and I've been submitting it to contests. It was a long listed for the St. Lawrence Book Award. So that was very encouraging. But so far, no traction for that. And then I'm still submitting some of the individual stories from within there. And then I'm trying to start something that's either, I'm very interested in, I've always been interested in collage, but I think there's more and more of there's many more books out there that are sort of linked or collage format. I loved, what is her name? Why can I never get her name? Emily St. John Mandel, The Glass Hotel. I just love that book. It's so fearless. It just goes like wherever it wants in time and from character to character, and you're just completely immersed from the first page. So, you know, I have sort of a theme going back to Sarah's of this idea of loyalty and betrayal, and more within friendship, and then an emphasis particularly on romance or family, so that it's, you know, maybe it's a novel, maybe it's stories, or, you know, maybe it will only be a chapbook. I kind of have like versions of, you know, scrap on all those scales. And then some days I think like, well, this is not, I need something completely new, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Well, I think that you have a lot of things going on, and you know, I think you'll figure it out. I'm
Hope
very
so.
confident
Yeah.
you're gonna figure it out.
How to do
For sure.
something. Less
Yeah.
TV, more writing. Yeah.
Oh, what about you, Sarah?
So as I said before, that novel is there that I have always been writing, and I just drop it for months, but I really hope to, you know, at least get through one draft of that novel so I can figure out what I need to do next.
Yeah.
And also of this chapbook, a couple of people who have read The Skin Over Milk have said, we want to know more about what happens to these characters. So where is what do you want to do a part 2? So I don't know, maybe I can, you know, do a part 2 of the same story, you know, another chapbook. That's something that's entered my mind now, that maybe I could do something like that. And there's another story of mine that was published in Witness magazine, and there was 8 short snippets of a girl, a brown girl, who was you know, just very, because of her skin color, she was not mistreated, or, you know, and that's another thing, that because of her skin tone, how people are just alienated from everyone. So and that's what I'm thinking, that those are 8 short paragraphs. Maybe I could expand them into chapters and have a chapbook there. So you know what, I'm finding ways to get away from my novel and do smaller things, so that I don't know, maybe I'm just procrastinating that, which I should not. I should get back to it. But yeah, I have a couple ideas in my mind, but haven't started actively working on them yet.
That's amazing. I mean, novels in Flash have gotten so much more popular too.
Yeah.
So it could very well be, I mean, I could see that Skin Over Milk world just being its own thing. I mean, there's so much, right? Because I love the chap, because it kind of just starts in the middle of what's going to happen. But there could very easily be flashback pieces. There could be more about the relationships. There could be what happens to the girls later, and what they choose to do. But yeah, I think you're going to figure it out. I think you have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that I see that are just so strong. So I would be thrilled to see any of these works in the world. And that goes for yours too, Sue. I'm going to follow the 2 of your careers eagerly. Right. Well, thank you both so much for this. I really appreciate it. It's been a really wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
I am going to turn off the recording now.